So, Jason, across the screen, how you doing?
Good. What are we talking about this time?
Today we're going to be talking about Terry Pratchett.
I know he's an author. I don't know of what.
Right. So this is a bit of an unusual one because we mostly plan to stick to music-based one, but it does link back to music. But I am a massive fan of Terry Pratchett. So any excuse to talk about Terry Pratchett, and I will take it. So, as Jason mentioned, he is an author. What he's an author of, he's most famous for the Discworld fantasy series, which is they're kind of spoofs of the fantasy genre, essentially. So they are particularly famous for, well, they're just being parodies, literally, as I said. He's been about since the mid-'80s, I think. Like, some of his stuff's a bit earlier than that, but I think the first Discworld, The Colour of Magic, was I want to say 1985, but I know it's going to be wrong.
So when you say spoof,
1983.
Okay, so when you say spoof, like a parody series?
Yeah, but you ever heard of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I've heard it, I wouldn't know it.
Right, for folks who are aware of that series but not Discworld, it's a fantasy equivalent of that. It's still it's a fantasy series, but takes the piss out of fantasy series.
Okay.
And it's very heavily inspired by stuff like Lord of the Rings and that, because that was the thing back then. Harry Potter wasn't a thing at the time, so
thank God.
Obviously, but it ironically kind of did Harry Potter to a certain degree before Harry Potter. Because like Harry Potter, it had its own university, the Unseen University. And the first two books were based around a student from that university called Rincewind. Okay. But here's the kicker. Rincewind and most of the students are old men.
In a university?
Yeah, they're not very good.
Okay.
Rincewind in particular, spoilers for how old book. He's not particularly good at magic. He can't produce any magic because when he was younger, he got in contact with a forbidden book, and one of the spells in the book, got lodged in his brain, and every other form of magic was too scared to hang out in his brain because of that one spell.
It's really abstract.
Yeah, it is very abstract, but basically the first two books are basically him taking some tourist, the first ever tourist in the Discworld, on tour around the local area. Sounds boring, but then you realise the first few pages he burns down the major city and Moorpork.
We're just casually opening with like mass destruction. Then I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's done many books. Like Rincewind isn't even like he's one of the main characters of the series, but there are so many books. There's over 40, I think, that have been written, but not all of them. They're like the borderline like Final Fantasy, but we're in the same universe. Like some stories are completely unrelated to each other, but progress forward still.
So it's sort of like a multiverse?
Nope.
No.
There is a multiverse, but Discworld isn't a multiverse. It's literally just it's based on a disc. It's a disc that's being carried on the back of 4 elephants that stands atop a giant turtle.
Oh, okay.
Which is somewhat that you find in some mythology, actually. It's not exclusively a Discworld thing. But, yeah, it's just funny. And one of the plot points of the first book is they want to know the gender of the turtle. I think it was female. I can't remember. But, yeah, I absolutely adore these books. My favourite character in the series is Death. literally, the Grim Reaper, Death himself, is a main character in this series.
Are we talking like a Billy and Mandy kind of death, or what death we have?
He kind of is. Not.
Oh boy.
He is. He does have that element of silliness to him, but he's not Jamaican. He's borderline the traditional Grim Reaper you think of, but he's curious about life, and it adds like so much humanity just to that equation. One of the he first appears in like the first book, but he's not a main character in it. But the second book introduces the fact he has a daughter. So eventually he gets to his first main book where he's one of the starring characters called Mort, which is my second favourite one out of the lot. The first being the Hogfather, which I'll talk about a little later. And it reveals the daughter he's adopted. He saved her from drowning when she was a baby. Problem is, she don't really age in his world. So she looks 13 or something like that, but she's like 80.
Ooh, damn.
And eventually, Mort stars a guy called Mort, who's a kid looking for an apprenticeship, and he gets an apprenticeship with Death.
Such a strange concept.
He eventually goes out with Death's daughter and has a grandkid who's called Susan, and Susan happens to be one of the best written female characters in fantasy, in my opinion. And she and her grandfather Death star in probably one of my most favourite books, Christmas specials and general TV specials about books in general, The Hogfather. Like, if you want to get into this series, read or watch the Hogfather special. One of the two, you're going to have an excellent time. For those that don't know, one of the main characters in that special is played by Del Boy.
Okay.
What's his name? Sir David. I'm really mad at this now.
Should host as well.
I apologise. I will turn my British card in once this video has been finished. David Jason. Actually, Terry Pratchett, sir, as well. He's knighted. Both of them are knighted. So that TV special, because David Jason appears in it and Terry Pratchett appears in it. So there's two official British knights in that TV special, if anyone's interested. Now, I just massively recommend his series in general. If you want to read another fantasy series, but you don't want to do Lord of the Rings, or you don't want to do Harry Potter because reasons, Discworld is your man. For anyone also aware, Terry Pratchett wrote Good Omens with Neil Gaiman as well, which is a popular Amazon streaming series at the moment. So you're probably wondering, Ryan, you said you promised music facts. How does this relate to music? Well, my dear viewers, Terry Pratchett was a British icon, and as many British icons do, they hang out with other British icons, including rock stars. And there's two particular famous cases. I'm currently reading this from Terry Pratchett, A Life with Footnotes. Anyone aware of his books? He's well known for using footnotes in them to add little extra funny details. It's a biography written by Bob Wilkins, who, for those that don't know, is basically his assistant since the early 2000s to his death. So he's a good resource on Terry Pratchett, basically. Like, other than maybe asking the man himself, which unfortunately he can't do anymore. He's one of the next best options, other than his daughter, probably. Terry's daughter, should say. One of the things Terry was well known for was his engineering and astronomy skills. So like staring at the stars, stuff like that. And he used to hang around a particularly famous British astronomer, Patrick Moore. That don't sound like much. It's like he hosted a few TV shows. The Sky at Night, in particular, was a famous one. But because Patrick Moore's like top of his field, basically one of the biggest guys in Britain. So you know who else happened to hang around with him at the time as well? You should know this one, Jason.
Brian May?
Yes.
I figured because you say astronomy, Brian May was like a big astrophysicist, so.
Yeah. He and Terry Pratchett and Brian May used to stare at the sky through a telescope to watch the stars. And that is honestly really cool. As you can probably tell, viewers, I imagine Jason's probably buy a bunch of his books now just part of Queen now. Part of Queen.
Part of Queen. Oh, that whole orange box back there is all just Queen stuff. Oh, all just
he owned. For those that don't know, Jason owns more Queen stuff than I think most of Queen does now.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But this video isn't actually based on that one, though. There is another famous incident with of a particularly Irish variety.
Oh.
Now, are you aware of the band U2?
I know that one guy Bono, everyone thinks he's a bit of a prat, but not much beyond that.
He has a bit of a history, Bono does, but unrelated note, there's a film based on a band that tried to compete against U2 and they had a film out called Killing Bono, where the singer of this band almost killed Bono, and it's a really good watch, actually. I recommend it. Unrelated now, but what people might not know, they own a hotel. U2 own a hotel called Clarence Hotel.
Right.
And with Terry being a particularly well-travelled writer, he stayed at a lot of hotels, and one day he did find himself at one of Bono's hotels. I think he's only got the one, I'm not too sure. His assistant, Rob, introduced Bono to him. And you think most people get a bit starstruck, wouldn't they? But not Terry. He didn't give a shit. Like, the only time he ever got starstruck, apparently, was I'm going to look his name up again. Patrick Moore. That's the only time. Even Brian May didn't give a shit.
Wow.
So Bono introduced himself, and Terry looked at him and said, "Oh, you work here then?" And he was like, "Yeah, technically." And then Terry said, "Oh, good. Can you make me a milkshake then?"
Oh, it would be the oh.
Can you imagine having the balls to do that though? Just go up to Bono's hotel, go up to Bono. He didn't even go up to Bono. He was introduced to Bono, and then saying to Bono, the guy who's supposed to be famous for his ego, he didn't go up to Bono. He'd been introduced to him. So that alone is, big deal. And then just turn around and say, "Can you make me a milkshake?"
Oh my God. I feel like in his head, Bono's half like, "Oh, I've got to use this idea for one of my relief efforts over in Africa." Oh my God.
You know what the best bit is, Jason?
What's that?
Bono made the milkshake.
Oh my God. He actually did it. But does this book say, like, was it begrudgingly or what?
He doesn't say in particular, no. It said he'd done it.
I mean, would Bono have been equally as like was Terry Pratchett a big deal when he met Bono?
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose he would have had to have been.
Back in his heyday, I'm trying to look at the particular year when this particular thing happened. It's hard to say. I would say early 2000s, because this is when, like I said, his assistant introduced him, and his assistant came about round about then. So, yeah, Terry was a big deal even back then. I don't think he was at the top of his game necessarily, but it was like 10% off 100, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, Terry Pratchett basically did Harry Potter numbers before Harry Potter was a thing. Fortunately, he did lose his title. He was basically Britain's biggest author at one point. Like, before JK came along, essentially. And I think, unfortunately, JK has sold more books than him overall, sadly. But that doesn't mean they're good. Like,
oh, that's a whole other kettle of fish, isn't it?
yeah. But Terry basically continued writing till his death.
Wow.
To the point he just said what to write to his assistant.
Sounds a lot like Freddie Mercury, that does. Literally just going, like, literally basically work until you drop dead, because I guess what else have you got to do?
This guy was a multi-millionaire and he still continued. He was pretty much, probably on the same scale as Bono was. I'd say probably higher than Bono, because let's be honest, were U2 relevant back in 2000?
No idea, but I have never been a U2 fan. Like,
in my college, they used to make us play Vertigo as an intro song, and the reasoning was because it was piss easy. It was a good thing. Like, we never knew it. We didn't know anyone when we first went, so it's better to say play this to break the ice, ain't it?
Yeah, I suppose.
But yeah, it was still pretty relevant because that song came about 2004. So yeah, Terry Pratchett made Bono make him a milkshake.
Christ. And
then he went off later to go stargazing with Brian May. That's my headcanon of the whole thing.
Imagine if he asked Brian May to make him like a cup of coffee.
Probably did. He probably did.
Oh man, that's so amazing.
Someone was bound to it that back then when they did the Stargate, and someone said, "Oh, can you make me a drink, please?"
Yeah.
They're bound to it. But I think Brian May's less funny because I don't think he's got quite the same ego.
Oh yeah, Brian May's a very subdued kind of musician. Like, obviously he knows how big he is, but you always feel this kind of humbleness about him.
That's it.